Who's here at Kscope for the first time? Oh, great, good. And show of hands, who's fairly new to Apex? Great, and who's very, very comfortable and has built multiple apps with Apex? Okay, wonderful. All right, so well, let's get started. I know it's a presumptuous title, the definitive guide, but you know, it sounds good. My name is Jorge Rimblas. I work for Insum Solutions, and you can find me on Twitter at Rimblas. You can find my blog, rimblas.com, and I've been using the Oracle database for a long time. I started in '95. And at some point when I learned about Apex, it was a breath of fresh air. And from that, it was back when it was called HTML-DB. And at that point, I decided to stop doing the previous type of work I was doing, which was Oracle EBS and Oracle Apps extensions. And I was ready to leave forms behind. And I was very excited about Apex. So since then, I've been focusing on Apex work. You've probably seen this a few times because we have a handful of presentations. So we do development, consulting, maintenance work. We're committed to innovation, and we have internationally recognized staff. All right, great. So the goals. My goal for this session is to help you be comfortable enhancing report layouts. That's my main goal. And as a side parameter, parentheses, I recommend that whenever you attend a session, you have a goal in mind. What do you want to get out of that session? And I think that helps our brains focus our knowledge and pay attention to things. So even those of you that have been using Apex for a long time, I think hopefully you'll find a tip or two or some techniques that will help you enhance your applications. We're going to cover what is a design pattern for displaying data. We're going to talk some about classic reports, classic report custom name templates, interactive reports, interactive grids. It's a lot of content. I should mention the last one. It's what I'm calling it the single line alert or messages. So that's another technique that I like to use a lot. And because it's so much, I don't expect to make you experts today, but I think I'm going to uncover some things that you can do on your own immediately. Hopefully you can start using these things immediately in your applications. Please interrupt if you have any questions as I go. It's a big room, so if I don't hear you, feel free to say hey or Jorge or dude or anything. All right, so what are patterns for presenting data? Well, let's talk about tables, right? Just super quick. If we talk about HTML, we're going to have the table tag, the TR tag, and the TD tag. Who's familiar with these? Yeah? Perfect. So then you all kind of recognize this structure. You have your table, TR for table row, TD for table data, and then you repeat, right? You can have multiple TDs and multiple TRs. And there's more elements, like, but they're optional. Actually, a lot of these are optional, but you can have the TH for table header. Those are your headers. We'll use THs. There's a T body to define the whole body, and those things are going to help us with some extra styling. If we look at a simple report, we can see that all the TD elements, they kind of look the same. Actually, let me switch over here. Let's make this a little bigger. And I'm going to right-click and select Inspect, and that opens the inspector. And let's see. I'm going to make that a little bit bigger so you can see it in the back. So you can see how when I hover, you have those TD elements. That's a little bit too much. And you have the table rows, right? Each table row is right there. And if we look at the pattern, All the TDs have a class. They have the headers, which is optional. Headers is something that Apex will add for us. And the class is part of the template. And if there's alignment, you can see here how we have alignment center or right. The default is left, so then it's empty. So when you declaratively change those options, Apex will create that. All right. Let's talk about lists. Lists are super powerful. And who's on Apex 4 still? That's okay. It's okay. It is. Almost everything we're going to cover applies to Apex 4 and before. I'll try to point out things that are brand new. But in the universal theme in Apex 5 and 5.1 with the universal theme, there's a lot of list templates, and we can leverage those. So list templates could be as simple as a to-do list, and we'll have a UL tag and a LI tag. And if this was my list, let's break it down. You have the UL that is going to open the set of rows and LIs for each of my elements, my list elements. And if we're trying to turn this into a template, you can see that we can parameterize the content into simply saying LI and something inside. So we're going to call that our, in Apex terminology, when you're looking at a template, that's going to be your for each row, what am I going to do? Okay? That's your for each row. And then the UL and the opening UL, closing UL, those are going to be your before and after rows. Same thing for the table, right? The table, you're going to have the opening of the table, your headers, and then you're going to have for each row, you're going to have your TR and TDs. So it's the same type of concept. So let's look at some examples. These are classic reports. So this, big deal, right? This is just a plain report, but I'm highlighting the rows via the template, making a template change, and we'll look at that. This other example, it's a little more complex. This is a custom layout in which we have phases, new documentation, pre-audit review, those are phases. And within each phase, we have a to-do element, something that the operator has to do. And they check it off, and they say, okay, I sent the letters. I'm not going to do second letter request, so they can click the X and it grays out, or they can undo it. As they click the checkboxes, they're going to get their name, and they're going to get a date. And if all of them are completed, there's going to be a check there. So this is a classic report, and it's something that we're going to hopefully learn more or less how this is put together. This is another example. We're going to break this one down. This is a list of contacts, and you can see we can have a single entry for how to contact this person, or multiple entries. And we can specify, is it an email or is it a phone number? This one, it's also a classic report. How do they say in the movies? Names have been changed to protect the innocent. So this was not done for a shoe company, but this was exactly the layout we used for a public-facing website where they were indicating a category, indicator, out of stock, is it a new arrival, the description, the price, and your add button. So everything after the word men's, so men's was the header, was the title of the header, was the region title, and everything else is a classic report. Does that look cool? Kind of interesting? So within classic reports, we have two kinds. We have the generic column template, and that's what we use every day. When you just create a report, you're using the generic column template. It's generic because Apex doesn't know how many columns you're going to have, so it has to expand. It has to be generic enough to just display our data. That's why it's called generic. But little known fact is that we have name column templates, and those are a template for the whole row. And the whole row is at our disposal. We can do whatever we want with that row. So the generic one is going to be a template that every column just looks like this, a TD and a column value. It doesn't know what column it is, and for every column in our select statement, it maps to just a column value. In reality, it looks a little more complex because we saw that we have a class in the universal theme, but even if it's Apex 4, it will have a class in there, a substitution string for the alignment and the header that matches. So it looks a little more complex, but it's the same thing. It's the same that we were looking at. And when you're using this option, we can do things like this. We could highlight a row by modifying the template and saying, if I'm out of stock, so the ends are being highlighted. So that's my condition. I can have, if my product availability is N, I'm going to highlight the rows. And this is done thanks to the fact that we have multiple column templates in the definition. In fact, we actually have 4. I wish we had more, but Apex comes with 4 column templates, and each one can have a condition. And your condition can be based on a PL/SQL expression, and then you can say product availability, product avail equal N. That's going to use one type of template. And then the other rows will use a different type of template. So each condition changes. Yes?
Where is that?
Yeah, excellent question. Let me show you where, the question was, where is that? So I'm going to edit this page. And if we go to the report, you won't see, and I'm using 18.1 here, but it's going to look just about the same. You don't see any change, anything different here. If I go to attributes, I selected this. Normally, this just comes with standard. Okay? And what you're going to do is, let's see, you edit the component. Yep, I'm going to leave without saving. I'm editing that component. I'm editing the template now. This is the template, and this is a standard one that Apex comes with. Let me show you what the standard does. So it's going to have the before rows that we talked about, something to do before the rows. Then this is the header information, the template for the headers. But then for each column, this is where we have that alignment, headers, column header, and the column value. And this is column template number 1. How many did I say we had? 4. So here's the expression for number 1. It's not, we don't need to use it. And here's column template 2 with its own expression, 3, and 4. So let me show you the other way to get to this. If you see the breadcrumb, we're in Share Components, Templates, and we're editing Report Template. So I'm going to go to Share Components. I can go straight to Templates. And you could filter by Report Templates. And you'll find Standard right there. And you can see how it has a checkbox because that's the default. That's the standard one. And this handy button is going to help us make a copy of it. So I click Copy, and I give it a name, and it's going to be identical. But then we're going to modify it. So let me show you the one I already modified. So I called it a product template. So that's a copy. And the header's the same. The first column, it's now the one with the condition. Because it's going to work like a case statement where it's going to do the first condition, see if it applies, the next one, see if it applies, and then finally the last one's going to be your else, your default. So that's why you want to put the ones with conditions first. And the only thing that was modified here was I added the word highlight, and that's a class I created on my page to apply something to the highlight. Yes? Yes, they'll look a little bit different, but they're in Apex 4. And I'm going to bet they're in Apex 3 too. But anyone? 3? Apex 3? Hopefully not. Great. So if I edit the page, that highlight, it's right here in my inline CSS. I'm saying my TD with a class of highlight is going to get a background of some color. And the important is going to force it because Apex does that alternating row colors. So without the important, some rows would be yellow and the other ones would have that alternating color. I actually have a blog post. By the way, the slides are available and you'll be able to follow them. I will upload the latest slides. Right now, they're a little bit behind, just a bit. So give me today and tomorrow to upload the latest. But that blog post takes you step by step on those options. Let's go to name column templates because that's really the exciting part. So when you have a query, they're called name columns because every column will get its own token, its own substitution string. So product ID gets a product ID, product name, product name. In contrast to the one that we talked is generic, right? The generic, it's the same substitution for every column. So in the name one, we're going to use the name that the column has to reference them. Optionally, you could do it positional, and that would make it more generic, but then you're looking at a template that has a 1, 2, 3, 4, and you don't know what they are. But just keep in mind that you will find some of the universal theme templates use those generic names just positionally. And that just means column 1, column 2, column 3. You need to organize your columns in that order. So in this case, I have a query where I'm selecting a to-do, and I have a substitution string for my font awesome or font apex image. So what is this? It's simply a check or no check. Actually, I'm missing the check boxes on those now that I realize that. They're supposed to be just empty boxes, right? And what this is we're mapping the word to do. It goes there. We're mapping the word check based on is it completed. If it's completed, it's going to get a null value. If it's not completed, it gets an empty value. And if it's completed, it gets the word check. You're familiar with Font Apex, Font Awesome? I think we've seen them a few times. So if you go to the sample universal theme app, we can see the check. And here you go. So we're using this check, square O is the one I was using. And if I just look for, I'm going to put square. So if I remove the check word, I get that one, the empty one. So I got to add the word checked, and that's what we're doing with this option, adding the word check or removing it. Everybody with me? So let's look at that example. And in this case, I've taken the example to the point that if you click on one of the columns, it opens a modal window, and I could say it's completed by me. I'm not going to put a completed on. I save it, and the checkbox appears. And the report just refreshed. It's exactly what we've done with modal windows, opening, closing, and refreshing, right? That's very standard refresh dynamic action. But the nice thing here is we're working with a standard report that has that SQL I'm showing you. And the to-do column, it's a link. And it's a link to my modal page. Passing, well, it shows it to-do, but it's going to use the ID. Super standard pattern in Apex, right? That's very simple. So by doing that, I'm able to work with something that doesn't look like a report, but it behaves just like normal reports. Yes, cool. And you can take this more advanced. I have some videos on YouTube where I kind of walk through this example, and in this example now they're clickable. I can actually click the boxes right there. I could delete the elements, and I can drag and drop. And drag and drop is nothing else than opening changing the display sequence. So if I make this a 1, orange juice is going to jump to the top. Right? So drag and drop is really just changing the sequence. I know drag and drop probably sounds a little intimidating right now, but there's a whole sequence of videos where this example, I'm building it step by step. Some of you may have seen it. No? Anyone? See? Great. So yeah, the benefits is we're working with a standard classic report. And we get edit links. We get our dynamic actions to close the dialog, to refresh when we close. No, nothing really new here. The only thing we've done is we've changed the way we display the data. Now, let's go to a more complex layout. This one, we're going to mix different HTML sections depending on our data. So that's example with the contacts. There's 2 types of rows here. Who can tell me what they are? One row would be for, what was that? The what? The header or the name of the person. Okay? So exactly, that header, that is one type of row. And the other type of row is the one that has the type of contact and the value of, so these are the 2 types. One will look sort of like this. I'm doing a span of 2 columns. So this is the length of 2 columns, right? The type of contact and the contact information. And it's going to have an edit. It's going to have the name of the person, a role, phantasm, checkbox. That's one type. The other type, it's 2 TD elements. One for how to contact them and the value for that entry, for the phone number or the email. Those are the 2. So we need to combine them. Everybody with me? Simple select on my table. I have the names of those people, their role, how to contact, the type of entry that we have for the phone number. Is it a personal, the main, direct? Is it a phone? Is it an email? What it is, and if they're active or inactive. And we're going to be mapping those names right here to the templates. So let's focus on a single row first. If I select a single individual, for that single individual, I have both types of rows there. I have their name. Oops, that's not text. I have a name. I have their role. I have the first entry for contacting them, and if it's active or inactive. So my first row, my select, has both types of elements. So for a single row, we use both types of rows. Or said another way, for the first party row, party being the individual, we're using both types of rows. So we need a technique for identifying the first for every individual. The first one for Dwight, the first one for Michael, and the first one for James. We need to identify those. And then we need to distinguish the others. So when I'm looking at the rest of the contact information, I'm not going to care about Dwight as a name. We're not going to care about the name or the role. We already have that. That make sense? So we need a technique for that. And this is where analytic functions come in. Who's used them? Okay. Almost the whole room raised their hand, and that's fabulous because they're super powerful. Analytic functions, and we're just going to use one here for this main example. There's this row number analytic function. It basically, every time the party ID changes, it's going to start numbering again. So you can see how by adding that column, I get 1, 2, 3 for Michael, and then I get 1, 2, 3 for Dwight, and 4, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then I start again when I switch names, right? Or when the ID switches. In this case, I'm doing it by ID. And the order by, very important. Whatever order you want, but make sure you have some sort of order to distinguish how you want to number them. So why is this important, right? This is important because we can now identify the first row, but let me, I got one slide ahead here. I'm adding here a count analytic function. So this one doesn't require a group by. This query is perfectly syntactically correct. It does not require a group by. That count, it's going to count, it's grouping by that partition of party ID. So we get 3s for Michael, we get 4s for Dwight, when we get the 1. Okay? So that's another powerful analytic function. And that's going to be important because it will allow us sometimes in our layouts, we want to identify the very last row. If you need to identify the last row, this will come in very useful. Which one's the last row? That one where the count matches the row number. When they're equal, that's the last one. Okay? That's why I'm showing you this one. Sometimes you need to close some HTML on the last element. Okay? That's where it comes in. Great videos, they're like 2 or 3 minutes long, dedicated on each analytic function from Connor McDonald. I highly recommend that. Picture's done? All right. So now that we have my row number, I can see here that those that have a 1 are going to be my condition. Just like we have the product availability equal n, row number 1 is my condition for the template of the first type of row. The others are my else. And that gives me that list over here. Let's go to the actual functional example. I'm going to go to a client, and here would be the classic report with the clients, but over here we have this representation where I can edit and change the contacts. Let's see, let's make James active. So I'm going to say active yes, and that row is going to now jump and change. The gray, it's a little bit grayed out. That's going to change. There, so it goes here to the top with the check. Okay? So again, it's a classic report, simple refresh, dynamic action will then render the values. Let me show you, edit this page and look at that template. We're looking at this classic report. Here's my select. It's a little more complex because what I actually have in my data model is clients, contacts, and ways to contact them. So I'm just joining it all to make it one line. Nothing too terrible. But I basically have my party ID, my party name, my role, the columns we've been looking at. Here's my row number, right, from my analytic function. And if I go to the attributes, I have a template that I've assigned to this, my app contacts. And I'm going to go into that element. And I'm going to show you how it has for row number 1. There's a lot more than I had on the slide here, but it's just for the look and feel. I'm just have more classes to make it grayed out when they're inactive. Here you can see the party name. Here you can see the role, the type of contact. Here's where the phone or email would go. And that's when it's row number 1. I have both TRs, this one and this one, that the header, the name of the person, and the first way to contact them. And my row template number 2 doesn't need a condition. That only has the 2 TDs here, where we have how to contact them and the value. Make sense? There's some limitations. Not good, not bad, simply things to be aware of. Yeah, we're looking at a lot of HTML here. They're not that reusable like this when you're naming the columns, because all your columns need to have that name. But if you make them positional, you can make it a little more reusable. And that's what Universal Theme does with the card layout and some of the list templates. They're by position. New columns may require template changes. I didn't quite say it, but you could be selecting 100 columns on your report, and only those that you're referencing are the ones that are going to be displayed. Okay? If they're not referenced, they're as if they were hidden. They're better than hidden. They're not even there. But you could use them as parameters for a modal window. That's why you would want to have them. We only get 4 templates. You could have pagination issues if you have a layout where you run out of, you have some rows and then you haven't closed your HTML before you need to paginate. And then the way to mitigate that is to write more complex queries where you're aware of how many rows you're going to have, and you make sure that you only return the number of rows that fit on a page. So it can get complex, but it only gets complex when you're mixing layouts, when you're doing a layout like this, or more complicated, like the one with the shoes. That's when it matters. But if you're doing a simple list, it's never really a problem because the after rows to close the HTML will be placed before the pagination. So that always closes, and then you get pagination. So if you have the single rows, it's not a problem. There's kind of limited support for interactive reports and interactive grid, but we're going to go into those in a moment. So far, all good? Let's talk about HTML expressions. Those are going to be available in classic reports and interactive reports. In Apex 4.2, we don't have HTML expression on interactive reports. So sorry, you're missing that. But you do have it on the classic report. So everything you're going to see here still applies. So we have a select statement, and let's say we have .html. It's kind of simple to read, right? We're going to have a class called title, the author class with the author. We have the word by, the summary of the book, the copyright. We have the copyright symbol and the year. We can place that HTML into this HTML expression field. And let me show you the end result. This would be the regular report, right? Exactly same query. We can make it look like this, where you have the title, the author, the description, and the copyright. And let's inspect this. And you're seeing that H2, the author, the summary. Let me move it a little bit so you can see it better. The summary and the copyright. Okay? So that content here's the HTML expression example. Here's the select statement. We do have all these columns, but what I've done is I've set them, almost all of them, to hidden. The only one that is being displayed is the book name. The author is hidden, the year is hidden, and the summary is hidden. They're all hidden. And I've selected, arbitrarily, I selected book name to be my plain text. And here's the HTML expression field. I just placed that HTML. So I didn't have to create a custom template at all. All I did is tell Apex, how do I want to display that content with my fancy HTML? So this will cover you 80% or more of the time. Something like this. Very simple to change the layout just by populating the HTML expression. What else was done on this example? Excuse me? Okay, good question. The question is, what is the div tag, right? The div tag it's almost like an empty tag that makes things be a box on the screen. That's all it is. It's a box around our element. And the reason I need it is because I want anything that's in there to have a class. And with that class, what I'm doing is I'm making it italic. That's it. I just want that content to be italic. So I'm just applying that. So it's an empty element. If I inspect this, there's the div. It really doesn't have, you can see the whole highlighted. It's just an empty box or rectangle, sorry, that has the content there. And it's everywhere on HTML. You're going to find div and span. The difference is the spans go next to each other until they run out of space and they go down. The spans go to each other. The divs want to use all of the available space. And they push, anything that follows gets pushed below. That's the big difference between divs and spans. But they're both transparent until you do something to them. I should not go into this example because I'm going to run out of time, but I'm going to do a outline, 1 pixel, solid, and red. So I just highlighted the size of the div. Now you can visually see where the div is. So what else I did? Well, here's something I did not do. And this is a security thing. I did not have to strip the HTML. So who's written a query that concatenates with HTML, like a BR tag to break the line? And you concatenate it, and then you need to turn that off so that it gets used as HTML. And that is a cross-site scripting security flaw, because your user could type JavaScript in that field, and now you're executing their JavaScript on your application. So always, always try to avoid turning that off. It's always on by default on new reports. If you have it, if you need to turn it off, it's because you control all of the content on that field. It's not user enterable, okay? Like you're in control of that content. So that's something I did not do.
So instead of VR, with your example with the divs, I've used spans a lot. I never connected the difference between div and spans and what you just said. So you just do 2 divs instead of a VR in this.
That's right. I mean, it could be something like this. Imagine that's not there. I'm going to just place it here. You would put the BR. Oops, the keystroke didn't work. BR, you will place the break there, and then your other field in your HTML expression. Don't place the BR on the query. Place it on the HTML expression field.
So then you have to substring a field and break it into the 2 that you normally have the BR.
It's already broken. You're concatenating it. That's why you have the BR. It's already separated. Leave it separated and place the BR on the HTML expression. Leave the HTML there and leave the query selecting your data. Yeah? That was worth the cost of admission. All right. I did remove the headings, because now I'm controlling the way I format the layout. So I turned off the headings. And you probably want to turn off the download, but that's optional. If you have it on, the hidden columns don't download. And because I placed all of my HTML in the book name, if you download, all that gets downloaded is the book name. That HTML expression doesn't get downloaded. Okay, so just be aware of that. So that's the end result. We saw the demo. We're good? All right, so we talked about how we have the for each row. We learned that. We learned that we have the before rows and after rows, right? Now, we're going to use this for something that's called, as I said here, the detail view. So now we're going to see where on interactive reports and interactive grid, we can do some custom layouts like what we just saw without having to create a template. On the interactive report, there's a section where you can turn on the detail view, and if you click on detail view, that content changes. So you can have it, you can turn on the icon view, the regular middle one, the report view is the default. That's the one we get always. And there's a place where you can turn on the detail view. So let's, let's see. Actually, I need to go to a different app. For that, we're just going to go to the sample database application. I'm going into products. And that's the default, and here's the detail view. Switch, switch. Now this is enabled this way. I'm going to edit the report. I go into attributes. So here's a simple select statement, or complex select statement, but that's just your select. And over here under attributes, you scroll and scroll and scroll, and there's going to be the icon view. If you want to turn on icon view, it's right here. And then there's the detail view. And the detail view has what we already learned was the before rows, and for each row, what am I going to do? And then what am I going to do at the end, the after rows? So you place your HTML on these elements, and now you get some fancy layout. I'm going to open this and say, let's see, how did this look? Just for kicks, I'm going to change the size of accessories. So I'm going to find the category. Here's the category. I'm going to do a simple span, inline style, just for speed. Font size. I was drawing a blank there. Font size. I'm going to make it twice what it is right now. I'm going to place it over here, save it, run it. So now accessories is twice the size that it was. So this is all HTML. You control it however you want to present it. So that could be a nice way to change how you present your data. And exactly the same thing is available on the interactive grid. But the interactive grid has other goodies that you can do. And in this case, those buttons and those elements, that's a fairly complex JavaScript example. But you can find that example going to this website. That John Snyder's is a member of the Apex development team, and he's the person responsible for the interactive grid. And he's blogged, actually all the blogs are just a wealth of information. The specific thing you'll want to do is download what's called the Interactive Grid Cookbook, if you haven't heard of that. And he's updated it a few times already, so you may need to just search for the cookbook, search cookbook, and then you just make sure you download the latest one. And what it is, it's an application full of examples. Here's the Interactive Grid Cookbook. All these are different examples, and in particular, this interactive grid cards. Here's the one I was showing you. So they show like cards, but this is an interactive grid. It has a totally custom template on how it's displayed, and it allows you to change the size and change if you want 1 or 3 or 2, and the search. We're not going to go into how those buttons are done. That's really just all JavaScript, and there's a lot that we can get distracted looking at that example. But it's going to have exactly like for the interactive report, it's going to have the before rows for each row and the after row. All right. Then here's something that I'm calling the single line alerts and messages. Here's an example. Let me break down what this is. So we use this in an internal application. We need to generate transactions for billing. We want to generate transactions on or before this date for a specific project. Mandate is our Canadian word for projects. And for whatever mandate we select, we want to see how many transactions we're going to generate. So that the line right there, it's a classic report. And then I have a button. So let's break it down. That's a classic report. We'll break it down a bit. Or here's another example, this alert. This alert is just a validation check. I'm checking to see if a user is missing a role, and I'm saying this user is missing the admin role. So that's just a simple check validation. But that line, it's a classic report. That is not plain text. So let's see how those are done. Here's the breakdown for that element. The generate transaction region is going to have some sub-regions. The filtering, where we have the date and the mandate we want. The classic report, where I count how many apply. And then another region that has the generate button, and another region that has my legend at the bottom. So let's, I know it's kind of small, but there's the filtering, there's the classic report, and the button and the legend. Just the legend is plain text, just whatever you want to say, right? Whatever applies. So that's the layout. I'm just placing sub-regions next to each other, and one of them is a classic report. And that classic report has this HTML expression. There are this many entries, this many total entries, and this many are mandate entries, this many are billable, as opposed to vacation time that is not billable. So that's what we're trying to identify, which ones are one or the other. The specific doesn't matter. What it is that single line of text is an HTML expression on a single report that doesn't have headers, doesn't have pagination, and when I switch my drop-down, it refreshes. And I show you the different values. It's a very trivial dynamic action that refreshes the report. Yeah, questions? There's the HTML expression. My columns are still scaped, so I don't need to strip my HTML, right? I'm going to place my content in the HTML expression. I'm removing the pagination. I'm removing the headers. Let's talk about this one. This one is a little bit different, and it's a little bit simpler, and it really depends on your use case. In this case, that's the column heading, and that's the value. So basically, it's a report with a single column, and that whole text, it's right here as a heading, and then the value. So it's a report where I'm saying, display my headings and values side by side. There's a template for that. We don't have to build it. Basically, you go into attributes, you switch the template type to a predefined template type, and there's an option called vertical report. Then you turn off the pagination, and you get the layout. Let me show you that example. Okay. I've lost. Oh, there it is. Here's the example. That's the header, and that's the value. Let's edit this. The report, it's some query. This case is just hard-coded. I'm just selecting the name that I want to display. Actually, company doesn't even matter. I go to attributes, and normally it's theme and standard. So if it's theme and standard, it looks heading and report. Okay? That's how when you first create it, it looks like that, and then you go into the attributes, you switch to predefined, you switch to vertical report, and there's other options here. There's a CSV option. It's kind of interesting. So I set it to a vertical report, I save it, run it, and now this is the heading. This could be a list tag on a query, could be a single select, whatever you want. Pretty simple, right? And that covers so many use cases with those two examples. So we've seen the classic reports. We've seen how you can use custom templates to create some fancy layouts. We've seen how you can just use the HTML expression as opposed to having to create a full-blown template. We've seen how you can use the detail view on interactive reports and interactive grid, where you can just say my before rows for each row and after rows, and you place your HTML there, right? And then these single line examples where it's still a single report and you can make it look very different. Questions? Yeah. Well, it's a whole other problem. That's a great question. The question is, how do you print this? If you print a page, it'll probably look mostly okay. I don't know what would happen with a product like Apex Office Print. Maybe there's somebody that may be able to test it out for you, or maybe they already know. I don't know if it's going to grab that layout for you automatically and print it, because they do grab the layout of the report, but I don't know if it does that. So yeah, printing, I don't have a good answer for you right now. But yeah. Yeah. He can check that out. Yeah. There was another hand. No. All right, I got a little bit of time. I'm gonna live on the edge. Here's a quick example. One more thing. Unless somebody wants to go. Let's say somebody tells you, here's the website. Who's used the mobile app for sessions? Great. So you've seen a layout like this, right? This is the URL for the mobile app. And let's say that you need to replicate this report. This is it. They tell you, I want this in Apex, something that looks like that. Where would you start? So what we're going to do is I'm going to right-click, hit Inspect, and I'm going to try to identify where is the box. There it is. So I don't want that div. I don't want that div. I want this one. So that one is the HTML for that whole line. I'm going to copy. I'm going to an editor. I'm going to paste it there. This is HTML. And I can start seeing how I have my values. So what I've done before is I've created data. I created a table that has my session start, session end, the track, a color for the track, title, the location of the room. So I already have some data for that. And then what I end up doing is I take these values and turn them into names of my query. So then I can take this text and I'm drawing a blank as to where to put, session calendar, sorry. So I'm going to run this app. Another login. Go into sessions. So I just took the interactive report. Took that interactive report, went to sessions. Let me collapse. Well, let's just go to detail view. So what I've done is I identified what was the HTML, it's not here, but what was the start of that list of entries? What do I need to place before my rows? And then what this is going to be for each row. So I identify that HTML. Then I place here the other thing that's going to have my start time and end time. And this could be cleaned up a lot, right? This is going to be a link, so I could make it a regular Apex link and so on. But I've just done that. And then the other thing I had to do is download the CSS. So here, I can see the reference to the CSS. So I've taken this file, there were 2 files I had to save. I saved them. I placed them as my static files in my application so I can get the whole CSS look. And I have them temporarily off. Let's go to, where is it? Over here. I go here to session. Let me enable them. I'm actually just cheating, just referencing the files directly. The file I just show you, I'm just referencing those files. And then I run it, and I get something that looks already so close to that, right? There's a little bit of adjustments, and that space is there because if you go here, there's space for that. So there's a little bit of CSS work to do, but in very little time, we've taken some layout and we apexify it, I don't know, right? We have the color and the values. Does that make sense how that happened? All right, so final. This is a good time to fill out your evaluations. And if you have any other questions? Yes?
More than that, I'd like to give some advice on, like, for the CSS stuff, the classes, where to define it. I can see for a report that on a specific page, you define that class highlight, for instance, on that page.
Yeah.
But when do you use the steamroller to put the classes there, or
Good question. So to summarize, kind of where do you place the CSS? What are places to put your CSS for your pages? Theme rollers, it's a really good place, and with Theme Roller, we can actually, let's go to the different app. Theme Roller has a great place called the custom CSS. And right here, I could have placed that, and the benefit is that's available to all pages. The downside is that if somebody switches the style, you lose that custom CSS. So even when I do use it for some projects sometimes, I will version control that in a file so that we try to always have it and not lose it. But the other place for this is you go to Share Components, and we got 2 minutes here. Sorry, not there. User Interface Attributes. You go to your desktop attribute, and there's going to be a place for this cascading style sheet reference. That is the right way to do it for global CSS for your whole application. You reference a file there. And it could be a file that is in the operating system in the web server, or it could be uploaded to static files. Depends on your access. All right. Well, thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed this, and you can use it immediately.